There's a Sanskrit saying which says, "Oh doctor, you are the twin brother of the god of death." The god of death takes away life, but the doctor takes away life as well as money. FICCI Flow Chairperson Rati, all our wonderful, beautiful ladies and friends over here, all members of FICCI Flow. It's so wonderful to see all of you here. Her parents, Mr. and Mrs. Dhandania, who specially flown all the way, very old friends of mine. Her husband, Mr. Munde, who's as usual sitting in the last row over there, but I'm sure is a very important part in this event and encourages us hugely. All the wonderful ladies and the very few gents that are present here today. I'm going to share with you my entrepreneurial journey. I know a lot of you are entrepreneurs, and I'm going to talk very little about homeopathy. However, at the end of my talk, I'll be very happy to take as many questions of homeopathy or anything else that you'd like me to answer. I just thought that any entrepreneur's journey is always very challenging. And since a lot of you are entrepreneurs and a lot of you are first generation entrepreneurs, I thought it may be nice to just share my journey. And I'm sure a lot of you would resonate with it, will find some kind of common ground of something that I did, that you did as well in your life to reach where you are today. So my first fundamental dharam sankat when I started my practice was, how could I make money out of other people's sufferings? A doctor was then seen as a healer, a family physician, a friend, and very often even a matchmaker. We were actually called and said, Dr. Saab, मेरी बेटी अभी 18 साल की हो गई है, अभी से ढूंढना शुरू करिए, कोई ना कोई लड़का जो आप जानते होंगे. And this was more so in the case of homeopathy. When the missionaries brought homeopathy to India, they set up many free clinics. These mushroomed over the years, and together with a large number of amateur practitioners, led to the belief that homeopathy was good for free. If you had to pay for it, you better consult a specialist. And so challenge number one for me was to legitimize homeopathy as a paid professional service. It has been said that the science of medicine is the art of healing. It was thought that homeopathy was more of an art than a science. A hit and miss method. It works for some, doesn't work for others. Agar suit kar gayi to theek hai, varna. The second challenge was to correctly position homeopathy as a modern medical tool and to increase its acceptance. It was also believed that homeopathy works with experience. दादी माँ के नुस्खे और दादाजी की गोलियाँ एक समान मानी जाती थीं. You had to have white hair to prescribe white pills. Challenge number 3 was to change the perception of homeopathy from being a moribund science and the fuddy-duddy image that it had into an advanced medical system. And believe me, this took a lot of doing, and something that was practiced not only by retired practitioners. Like at that time, there were lots of retired people who used to practice homeopathy, and they used to give free treatment by reading books, and actually then convert it into a very professional system of medicine, which is practiced by qualified doctors. And how do I give a platform to young doctors to perform when people believe that homeopathy only works, with old people and with experience? And that was really a challenge. And when I started my company, I actually started with an average age of 27 years. I believe in young doctors. I want to tell you that even today, 70% of my doctors are females. I believe in the power of women very strongly. I believe that women make excellent partners in work. They are people who actually are very dedicated, very committed. They actually live the brand. And they are very caring in a profession like medicine. And they bring the soft touch, which is very important in medicine. So, how do I actually bring in young people, and how do I change the perception of saying that medicine is something which is very, very relevant today? You know, it changes so fast. You can't believe it. I've been practicing medicine now for 41 years. And I can tell you this, that when I used to teach in the 80s in UK, in City College and London College University in London, I was surrounded by, a very peculiar disease. And that was called Legionnaires' disease. I'd never heard about it. I'd never studied it in college. Legionnaires' disease was a disease which actually killed many people at that time because of cross-infection in hospitals through air conditioning. And multiple people died of respiratory failure because of that. Now, have you ever thought of it that air conditioning can actually cause you illness? There's something which is called sick building syndrome, which we now learn, SBS. Do you know that the cement that is used in the building, the paint that you use on the walls, all of it can cause you disease. And so you can actually live in an environment which is very unhealthy, not from outside, but even from the inside. And so these are all learnings to me as a doctor, as a young doctor, as I grew. I realized that there are so many diseases which we had never studied in medical college. And therefore, I think to train young people to be contemporary and who are with what is happening with the times is something which is very important. I never heard of diseases like swine flu. I never heard of bird flu. We never even heard of AIDS. And certainly we never heard of chikungunya. It sounded really like a bad word. We never had anything like that ever in our medical education. So, and the fourth challenge was really, because homeopathy particularly is so personalized and so individualistic in nature, how do you actually increase this and create a scalable, replicable business model that can work independently of me and reach economies of scale? And so when I set out 41 years ago to practice, these are the thoughts that I had as an entrepreneur, that what is that I can do to actually mitigate this? Obviously, I believe that all entrepreneurs always identify the why behind their business and the purpose of their existence. And when I kind of mulled through my early years of practice, I realized that there was one thing that was very common. And that was that a lot of patients that came to me and who were taking chemical medicine, and again, this is not against any particular system of medicine, but the fact is that when you take chemical medicine, for every action there's a reaction. And sometimes the reaction is stronger than the action. And I found that in almost every family that I was treating, there were people who got a reaction from vitamins that they were taking, from the medication that they had taken. And I did a bit of research and I found that every year, 300 people die every day, not every year, every day, of a drug-induced disorder, which is now medically called iatrogenic disorders. So there's a certain now, a qualification for this, wherein medical science now believes that there are lots of patients who suffer from drug-induced disorders. And therefore, if you really want to have a healthy world and a disease-free world, I think we should also move towards a drug-free world. And when I'm talking about a drug-free world, I don't talk about the drugs, the cocaine and the white powder that you talk about, the young people talk about. I'm talking about chemical medicine. I'm saying, can you imagine 300 people dying every day of a drug-induced disorder in America alone? You know what that is? That's the equivalent of a plane crash, a Boeing crash every day, and nobody talks about it. And I then realized that I must give people an opportunity to try out and at least experiment with an alternative system of medicine. And that was my belief that actually made me to develop homeopathy and to take it to people, because I wanted to give them an alternative system of medicine. I want to say you have a choice. I always believe that today, like Rati said, women are denied because they don't have a choice. I mean, do you know that certain parts of Switzerland just voted a few years ago to give rights of voting to women? Can you imagine that in a Western country? Now, can you imagine not having a choice in your choice of therapy? Why should you be forced to take chemical remedies? Why should you be forced to take drugs? Why don't you not have a choice and you decide what you want to do? You decide what works for you. And I think it was that passion that actually made me develop and take the system of medicine to people so that they could have a safer and a viable alternative. It was Shakespeare who said, "The evil that men do lives after them, the good is oft interred with their bones." But with a professional, everything lives with him and everything dies with him. I've seen this around, unfortunately, in my early years, you always find that doctors meet doctors. And doctors have picnics with doctors and they have outings with doctors. And my family anyway was like a medical family because my wife was a doctor and my father-in-law was a doctor and my father was a doctor and my mother was a doctor and my all in-laws were doctors. So every time we met over a dinner, it was a medical conference. So I've seen in the families that I worked with, in all the medical families, that the father had a large practice. But when he died, there was nobody to take over the practice. And I said this to my son as well. I said, medicine is one thing you can't inherit. You can't fit into somebody else's shoes because it's so personalized. People will always say your father was better than you, no matter how good a doctor you are. Because they're so used to you, they've been grown up on you, they've trusted you over a period of time. So if you had to create something which was permanent and something that outlived individuals, it had to be an institution. And that is when the idea came to me that I should institutionalize homeopathy. And that happened in 2000, 2001. Because I believe that people die, but institutions outlive, evolve, and grow. And therefore, if you had to keep something which outlived you, it had to be a brand, it had to be a company, it had to be something that worked independently of you. And that's how then this whole idea of Dr. Batra's Positive Health came about in 2000. I always believe that entrepreneurs are made and not born. I know that there are many generational entrepreneurs, but there's a very interesting saying which says that the first generation builds an enterprise, the second generation grows it, and the third generation throws it away. And I hope that there are no third generation entrepreneurs here in this audience. And a lot of them are first generation and second generation entrepreneurs. But I believe anybody can be an entrepreneur. You just require the will to do something different. And you need to learn to believe in yourself. And I'm going to talk about this as I go along. So, because there was no kind of business person in my family, we're all medical people. I actually started life and took up a summer job as an accounts clerk and a salesperson for Coke. And I believe if you can sell Coke and insurance, you can sell anything. I actually used to carry crates we used to get a commission of 1 rupee per 24 Coke bottles that we sold. And even if one bottle chipped from the top, it used to chip, then 8 annas was gone, 50 paisa was gone. So if 2 bottles chip, your entire commission for the entire crate of 24 bottles was gone. I remember having carried crates in high housing societies in Mumbai, which did not work, where the lifts did not work, and I had to carry it on my shoulder and take it up with loaders. And that's how then I worked my way up, and I then started practice in a charitable clinic.